So the topic of my presentation is exploring the truffle fungal diversity of the Midwest, our region, and I'm going to give a special highlight to Wisconsin species. So I am currently a graduate student. Master's of Science degree is what I'm pursuing right now in the lab of Dr. Arthur Group at UW-La Crosse in the Driftless. All right, so a little outline of my talk. There is the background, kind of an underlining on ground there. You'll find out more about that when we get into what is a truffle. So I'm going to give some background on what is a truffle, a little taster on truffle research in the Midwest, a species highlight there, and a little bit on cultivation. Cultivation is definitely not my strong suit, but it's something I'm curious about, and it's definitely something that you can do with truffle species in kind of a unique way compared to most fungal cultivation. So then I'm going to get really into the center of the presentation with some topics from my master's thesis. So that's Midwest truffle records inventory that I've been making, a little look at which truffles are in Wisconsin based on that inventory. How do you find truffles? Like, how do you search for them? I'm also relatively new to this, but I've been collecting as much background information as I can as I've been getting into truffles, and I'll share what I know. And then sort of the truffle find, what I'm actually working on for a species description. So real quick, just reminding people who are co-hosts to let people into the room. It looks on my end like there was somebody waiting, but maybe I can't tell. Okay, so getting into the topic, we have what is a truffle. I'm going to start with this part of the definition. They're hypogeous, meaning hypo like below, and geous, the ground. They're formed underground. So when I say they, the truffle, the fruiting body, what is making the spores? They're often just under the topsoil. You don't have to think of them as being many feet deep into the soil, or if one happened to be pretty deep, we wouldn't really know about it. And that's going to make a lot more sense when we get into their ecology later. So in fact, they might even be just at the very top of the topsoil to the point that they're poking out of the ground, where you can actually still see them coming up out of the duff. Pictured there is a rhizopogon, one of the basidio truffles. So getting deeper into hypogeous, it can also be that close enough subhypogeous. So I'm showing there the different rhizopogons, one observed from California. It's showing that the soil is actually completely hiding it. It might even be a few inches deeper. You can kind of picture that. And more about close enough, we would call that subhypogeous. So it's almost below ground. And this is showing Tuber caniculatum, a really cool species that you can find in the Midwest. So what do I mean by truffle? I've been talking about, oh, you can find them, these fruiting bodies underground. You've noticed in the pictures that I was just kind of going through, they're nugget shaped. They're not our usual cap and stem and gills type of mushroom, nor are they really like a morel standing above ground with that pitty cap. And they're also not like a cup fungus. They're completely enclosed. The shape is nugget. All of the spores are inside. And this is the science term for that, sequestrate. The spores are sequestrated inside of the ball, which can have an outer layer we'll get into later called a peridium, or can be just sort of a loose clump. And they're going to stay a nugget. They're not going to be like a puff ball that poofs open. They're going to stay a nugget. Okay, so where are these nuggets? Many, but not all, of truffle-forming species have specific relationships with trees. Usually ectomycorrhizal, like every species in the genus Tuber, a famous genus for truffles, are ectomycorrhizal. They're having their mycelium, little threads of fungal body, associating with the root tips, modified root tips of specific trees. So there's an example of a red oak root tip red oak being a native tree species for the Midwest, with tuber borkii, interestingly not a native truffle species for the Midwest, and one that was being documented here as spreading or not being or having been brought here accidentally in this case. And over there is a different oak, Quercus alba, with a native truffle species, tuber arnolarium. So it's pretty subtle, but this is going to get into it when you are looking for certain truffles. You're going to be looking at certain trees, and we're thinking about the impacts on truffle in their in terms of their ecology. You're going to think about their relationships with certain trees and other plants. They lack that active spore dispersal. So active spore dispersal would be wind or water, that the spores are blowing away in the wind or they're going around in the water. That's active spore dispersal. And truffles do not have it. They stay a nugget. They develop their spores in those nuggets. Those nuggets are usually underground, at least partially, if not entirely. And they're going to rely on animals. Pictured here is a northern flying squirrel tucking into some kind of jelly fungus. So that's not an example of a truffle being eaten, but it is an example of a rodent species that we have here in the Midwest, North America, that loves to eat truffles. Northern flying squirrels, if you see these, keep watching them. They might take you to the truffles. How are they finding them, though? Like this little critter found this mushroom just crawling around on a tree. How are they finding them if they're underground? And that is that it's a stinky lifestyle that truffles lead. At maturity, they are, so once those spores are ready to go, once they're ready to be dispersed and then spread around and germinate and go on to form their own truffles in the future, they're going to start producing odors. So the truffle itself is going to produce a bunch of odor chemicals. And that's going to be what's attracting your northern flying squirrel and all sorts of other animals to come eat those mature truffles. And that's the mycophagy. So from the animal's perspective, it's mycophagy. They're phagy meaning eating, myco fungus, they're eating the fungus. Then there's a different term, endozookery, where that's when the animal, from the point of view of the fungus, is spreading its spores. That's what the fungus is in it for. Sometimes you even see this being what we would call diploendozookery. And this is some cool new research I wanted to highlight. So you can imagine the range, though, to start with. The flying squirrel eats the truffle. The spores are basically going to be spread as far as that flying squirrel gets until it poops. And that's the truffle spores out the other end. What if our flying squirrel gets eaten by a fisher, or killed at least and moved around by a fisher? Well, that then becomes that diploendozookery, the secondary dispersal. So predator species, carnivorous species are also potentially involved in dispersing fungi, not just truffles, but other fungi too that get eaten by critters like flying squirrels. So this is a paper I was highlighting for people who are nerds like that. If you want to get into the details, it goes into them. So truffle is a pretty loose term. There's a reason why I haven't said, oh yes, everything in the genus this, or everything in the family such and such is the truffles, and everybody else isn't a truffle. There's specific categories that are all truffles, but you can find those within all three of these big phyla. So these are big categories at the very top, like right under fungi. We break that down a little bit further and we get Basidiomycota, Ascomycota, and Macroromycota, among others. And in all three of these phyla, there are truffle-forming fungi. So they have come to this form, this nugget form, this becoming stinky and attracting an animal and being spread around by being eaten lifestyle. They've come to that, what we would say, convergent. So they have converged on that same lifestyle despite being from different lineages in evolutionary history. And that's the term polyphyletic, that they're in different lineages. So up on the screen right here are examples of each of those phyla, Basidio, Asco, and Macroromycota, that are not truffle forming. So you can get a sense of those shapes compared to the form once you have examples of truffles in each of those phyla. So Ascomycota, this is kind of one of the famous truffle genera, Tubercumberlandins being an example of Ascomycota, but there's lots of other Ascomycota truffles. So in this, we have the asci. Going back a bit, I'm going to say Ascomycota usually would be spreading their spores like out of a cannon, basically, a tiny little tube full of spores that's going to shoot them out. That's the ascus. Here, the ascus for this species has quit being a cannon and just become another little sac. So this is not to scale, but a lot of these little sacs full of these little spores would be in this. And what's that? It's the gleba. The gleba is this internal material to a truffle. This is another example of the gleba of this Basidiomycota truffle. So this is totally different lineage, and it's come up with this same kind of structure. But if you look under the hood, sort of under the peridium, the outer skin, you find little chambers with basidia instead of asci forming and holding the spores. And then we have sort of the weird one, Mucoromycota, and this is kind of a loose lump. It doesn't even have a peridium really much to speak of, but it's just a bunch of the gleba that would be sterile tissue with the spores embedded in them. There's an example of this very smooth spore dyed blue, so we could see it better. How did they get here? That's a subject of some further research and debate, I guess, but this is from a paper by Bonito et al., lovely illustration, and it's also showing a hypothesis, the hypothesized evolution of Ascomycete truffle lineage. So we start out with our usual Ascomycete, like an open cup. If you know morels, those are just a bunch of those little cups kind of lifted up on a stick, and each of those cups are lined with the asci that are going to shoot off their spores. As we have selection toward those spores being spread around by being eaten by animals, and less about being forcibly discharged out of those asci, we get less and less inclination to bother with the act of spore dispersal. But also there's this idea that maybe it's about reducing the amount of water loss from the fungal fruiting body. So you kind of have that selection just and eventually you would end up with something like this. So you can see truffles that are at any stage in this, different species from different lineages that you'll find. Okay, so getting into the background of what do I keep emphasizing about the genus tuber? So some people use the term true truffles pretty much to mean the genus tuber. That tends to be European researchers so far as I've seen. And in North America, we'll use the term true truffles to talk about the truffles people are excited to find because they eat them. And that includes tuber, but it also includes truffles like Leucangium out west. And I'm just emphasizing tuber because that's the one that later I'm going to talk about that we have a new species to describe. So to orient you, we're in the Ascomycota and we're in basically these Pezizales related categories all the way down until you get that they're in their own family, Tuberaceae. They tend to have these either spiky or we call reticulate, honeycomb pattern spores is really common, different variations on that. You can think about how big, thick-walled spores with lots of ornamentation on it, as we would call that, might be helping them survive the passage through animal digestion. So looking at who you might already know who's related, Morchella. Morchella are in the Pezizales. So they're you could say, cousin to tuber truffles. And here's some other examples that I really kind of honestly showed just to show that those variations. We have the open cup, and then we have something that's chambered and a little bit enclosed, but maybe is still practicing a little bit of active spore dispersal. So it's purple, and that's pretty cool. So final sort of orientation to the background, I wanted to emphasize a little bit about that there has been past truffle research in the Midwest and North America going back to even times like 1920. So tuber caniculatum is a species that was described in Michigan from a specimen from Michigan. And it gets called for that reason the Michigan truffle. It also gets called the Appalachian truffle. It also gets called T.can or T-can because people didn't want to say caniculatum for some reason. So it was described by Helen M. Gilkey, a researcher from who got this, who was working in California, but received this collection from the Kaufmans and was able to describe it. And it came from a maple oak hemlock bordering a cedar swamp. This is one of the species I'm also emphasizing because it's actually one of the more delicious truffles that we have in North America. So to emphasize that here, you can check out lots about how to cook them and some about how to find them, and a chef's review of them on the Forager Chef website. Really like this write-up by Alan Burgo. So I'm highlighting it here. And there's some cool mention of specifically Eastern white pine being an associate by the Midwest American Mycological Information source. And also Alan Burgo mentions hunters, people searching for these tuber caniculatum, have had luck with oaks, hazelnuts, pines, and spruces. Okay, so I brought up culinary truffles. But what about the issue of native versus non-native species? I'm bringing it up as an issue because I think it could be, and because every time I have brought up the possibility of it being an issue, I haven't had anybody with a background in it say, yes, certainly it won't happen, or it's not going to be a concern. So I think it's something that we should consider. If we grow non-native species, if we inoculate them, which you can do by making a slurry, like just basically blitzing up a bunch of truffle that you're trying to get with mature spores and pouring that around a tree that they would associate with. And there's more to those techniques than I'm covering there. But the question I'm asking here is, could they escape? Could they become naturalized? And then if spreading pretty rapidly, could they displace things or potentially disrupt the environment and then be invasive? I would say the answer might be yes, which is also an oh no moment. It's been brought up in previous papers, like Dickey et al., going into that as a potential. And then also sort of it's happened before where there's been inoculation of a target species, in this case, Paraguay black truffles. That's Tuber melanosporum. That is a delicious truffle from Europe, so not native here. They were trying to have an orchard in Quebec, I think this was, with the Paraguay truffle, but they accidentally transported Tuber indicum, another black truffle species, but one that has considered like lower flavor value, and they didn't want it, so they considered it invasive. But it was spreading rapidly, and it was actually observed, at least as this paper kind of covered, to be moving from orchard to orchard, not just from tree to tree. So that to me is an indication that a species like Tuber indicum, that's an aggressive spreader, might be transported when we're trying to inoculate with something like Tuber melanosporum, and then could start spreading aggressively. Also, we just don't know. So I'm remain open and curious about this topic, and not but a little anxious. So I consider it, though, another really great reason for us to lay down the baseline and study our native truffles. There are potentials. So my slide, for some reason, did not orient itself correctly. I do want to have a shout out to Steve Uzgat first for this idea that to be cultivating truffles with hazelnuts in the Midwest as a particular concept is something that he was already developing long before I even thought about it. And he's been really very kind about sharing his knowledge and expertise in this area. So I want to bring that up before I talk about it. There we are with Sam and Eileen, neighbors of Arnie, having found truffles with their hazelnut trees, which was a really good time up in the Bayfield area. So hazelnuts and truffles, there's a long history there, both of foraging for them and people finding tuber truffles in particular associated with hazelnut. in Europe and North America. And there has been a history of hazelnuts being trees that get inoculated with tuber truffles on purpose for cultivation. In the Midwest, we have hazelnuts. We have our own native hazelnut species that's resistant to the hazelnut blight, which is a disease affecting hazelnuts. And we also have sort of this development program that's been going on by the Upper Midwest Hazelnut Development Initiative with all of their partners to develop hazelnuts, hybrids between the European large and flavorful nut varieties and the hardy, cold hardy, blight hardy Native American hazelnut trees, Corylus americanus. So just a thought about where this could go in the Midwest, or some of the thoughts we've been having. Some benefits would be it's local food. Hazelnuts and truffles sounds delicious. And it could support this local hazelnut production as has occurred with pecan truffles, tuber leonii, and related species being inoculated and supporting pecan orchards and being kind of done as a co-crop situation. It's obviously the potential detriment of ecological disturbance if this is being done with non-native species that again end up spreading and causing issues potentially. And then there's some challenges, if you're trying to go for native species, do you know where to get the inoculum or that slurry of material that's viable that you're going to inoculate your trees with? It's pretty difficult to do some of this work. I would not recommend it for just your average hazelnut farmer. And in fact, Steve was really wise in saying that when speaking to hazelnut farmers, you shouldn't be being like, yes, you can do this and lickety split get truffles. It's going to be some work. And also, figuring out the impacts of hazelnut or filbert blight on your trees, even if you are working with the more hardy strains. And there have been cases of attempts at creating truffle orchards with hazelnuts, and then they all fail because the hazelnut trees get wiped out. And then also just sort of balancing those needs between Corylus, the hazelnut, and tuber. But just thought I'm bringing up as background on why it's cool that there are truffles associated with hazelnuts native to the Midwest. So into the specifics of my research. My first objective was to get to grips with the situation. Before I started at UW-La Crosse, I did not know about truffles. I had been in WMS, I'd been in Wisconsin Mycological Society, and had learned about fungi and felt, I had my legs under me there. But truffles, I had not collected one at a foray. I had not really a good idea of it. They were in the Midwest. And before I got going looking for truffles, I wanted to also try to contribute to this field and learn more by making an inventory specific to our region. So this is how I'm defining the Midwest for this inventory, including 2 provinces and quite a number of states there that you can see on the map and listed: Manitoba, Ontario, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kansas, Missouri, and Kentucky. So that's sort of the range. And it's significant, not just for the reasons I've already talked about, that they're ecologically connected into all of those plant connections, tree connections in our forests. They're players in soil composition and ecosystem dynamics in the soil. They are connected to in our food webs, not just to herbivores like those squirrels, but also, who eats them? They're connected in all of those different ways. And what do we know about them in the Midwest? A decent amount, thanks to the great work of people who've already been researching them, but not so much as we would like. You can look at this map showing just tuber genus finds. And that's a popular, well-known truffle genus. That's not even looking at some of these less studied categories. So you can see sort of the blanks on the map in our area versus, say, the West Coast, especially the Pacific Northwest, where there's a strong foraging culture for truffles. People are going out. They're going out with trained truffle dogs. Same for Europe. And yeah, we just need to learn a lot more about what they're doing in our Midwest ecosystems. But who do we have? Before we know who we want to find, we need to look at who we know. So I'm making this spreadsheet kind of truffle observations, collections, and sequencing records, listing, getting like a most observed species, most observed genera, rough idea of ranges, and then trying to eventually, hopefully, manage that data and make it more visually appealing. Right now, you're just going to get the list form. Maybe someday this could support the creation of local field guides to help us all get out there and learn. So like localized field guides, I should say. There's a really good one for North America already. So the sources for this data, for anyone interested, it's all MycoPortal right now. And I am adding in additional records on a case-by-case basis from these other sources, iNaturalist, Mushroom Observer, some global fungi data, and personal communications from academic scientists and also community scientists, including people like you. And it's all going into a big spreadsheet. So right now it's just that MycoPortal data and a little bit else in, they're mostly being managed for me right now in Google Sheets spreadsheets. Okay. So which are covered? Because I said there's a lot of different categories, even right down to the species level, where species in that genus are truffle forming, and a species that's closely related to them might not be truffle forming. So that is why it's useful for me to make this inventory. You can't just go to MycoPortal and search up a family and get everything. I've had to make a curated inclusion list, and this list has been based on the Midwest Truffle Collections and Data by Dr. Roseanne Healy, some advice by my thesis committee at UW-La Crosse, and suggestions by truffle hunter extraordinaire Heather Dawson, and an initial look at the records and literature. And you're going to see why we have to look on a case-by-case basis. And this is it. So I've summarized my definition of a truffle here on this slide for you. And you can see those two images and decide who's a truffle. So to be a truffle, you got to be a multicellular fungus who is producing spores within that nugget, sequestrate, either hypogeous or subhypogeous, and not actively releasing spores as its main way of getting around, but mainly dispersed or spread through the mycophagia or being eaten by animals, with probably odors being the trigger to attract those animals when the spores are mature. Let's look at these two glomus species. One of them, I would say, is a truffle, that Glomus fasciculatum. It's hitting all the marks. It's close relative in the same species, Glomus corymiodes. Does that look like a truffle to you? That's just some goop on a leaf. So that's partly why you have to go on a pretty case-by-case basis in making your list about who's a truffle and who's not. Just a look at the numbers for the people who are interested, and we'll go pretty quick through this, and I can share my slides later directly to people who want this data or the whole inventory. So just to look at who I've already included within the phylum Ascomycota in the index. And then I evaluated some suggestions from mostly Heather Dawson, who was really helpful in getting those to me about what to add, but a lot of them tend to be just like worldwide diversity that hasn't been recorded here yet, but it's still really, I left up here because, wow, there is a lot of truffle diversity in the world that I think a lot of us haven't really gotten into too much. So you can see that the two, I would say, or three highlights here for genera with a lot of observations in the Midwest is tuber at 471 observations, and then Hydnotrita with 224, and Elaphomyces, the deer truffle, was observed 184 times. Still pretty low record numbers, I would say. We could, and a lot of these, when you get into the species level data that I have, a lot of them are just identified to genus, so they're not identified to species. Some of them are, but I think it also kind of highlights the need for more species descriptions and work there in the Midwest. And there's just a visual example for one of these, because I've talked a lot about tuber so far, but what about other Ascomycota truffles? So you can see that Dinsocarpa schnorrii, observed from Ohio. Here is very much like tuber, and it's just, you can't just look at something like this nugget here and without microscopy or maybe looking at additional features, maybe even sequencing, be able to just immediately tell what it is. You want to look closer. Okay, so this is who is already included from the phylum Basidiomycota, and a highlight here being Heminogaster. With 133. And you can see here, again, like the spores at the end of a basidia that's smashed up. So you would have to picture this, Hymenogaster is in the Agaricales. I included the orders here that these are in for anyone who kind of, that orients them. So Agaricales would be like your agaric mushroom, your button mushroom from the grocery store. And this is what that becomes when all of those gills basically get squiggled up and put in a thin case like a peridium. Think of this like the edge of the skin, the pileus of a cap of your button mushroom kind of mushroom that's just totally engulfed or made sequestrate these former gills, now squiggly gleba tissue full of spores. So some other, rhizopogon is probably the other one you're most likely to gonna encounter from in the Midwest. So I was evaluating ones to add, and again, it was a lot of zeros, but I was really glad to have looked into it for what's in the index so far. Some of these may absolutely be here. The additionals here of like +1 in North Carolina on iNaturalist, that's highlighting that there's a credible sighting on iNaturalist, at least, if not in Mycoportal, of something in Chamoxia, or Chamoxia. Some truffle that I didn't know anything about before now, but that I think should be on our radar for, hey, it's in North Carolina, maybe it could be somewhere in the south of the Midwest too. Same for Distunzia, sighting in Tennessee and Quebec, and Gastrosporium sighting in New York. So also Phallogaster, that's definitely here. We've found that actually at, I think, a WMS 4A. It just hasn't hit Mycoportal data. Okay, so final group here, the weird Mucoromycota, or I have a typo here on the slide, but Mucoromycota, not Muscoromycota. Here's another one that's kind of interesting to say, Gymgerdemania flammicorona. And that's an example species of this group here, with the flammicorona in this case referring to this pattern around these spores. So there's just a few genera to look at here, Glomus indigon and Gymgerdemania, and we've actually found one Gymgerdemania species in and around the La Crosse campus. Owen Zecca found it with some conifer trees down by the nature place. So they're out there, and I think he found it by observing a squirrel dig. Looking at our top most recorded genera in the Midwest, we have tuber in the Pezizales, Rhizopogon, a Basidio truffle, and there's its example, Hydnotria, and there's a picture illustrating that, and they're really cool spores. Also in the Pezizales, and Elaphomyces, the deer truffle, is number 4 most observed, and Hymenogasters. So this is what you could kind of get your eyes trained on. These are the type of things that you could find. Personally, they all look like flavors of small potato, but that's what you have to do when you're digging around in the soil, is start taking interest in those, and before too long, you'll have realized that you found a truffle. So getting into the Wisconsin data. So here's some species level data on ones that have been recorded in Wisconsin from the Mycoportal data. We have Elaphomyces species, specifically these 5 here, Asperulus, Cervinius, Granulatus, Muricatus, and Variegatus. This is a Elaphomyces species. I'm still determining which one it is, but they're commonly called deer truffles, and you might, in this case, not just be finding squirrel digs, but maybe even deer digs. Deer do eat truffles in our woods. And Yeah, this one was found at the Mycelium Mysteries foray that we did, digging around under a birch. And these are its spores. Kind of a bad picture of the spores, but it's what I could do with my phone through the microscope camera. But they're big and brown. All right, so more Ascomycota species in Wisconsin. This was the top observed species in Wisconsin, the Hydnotria tulasnii, so far from the microportal data. So that's the red fold truffle, and it's a relative of, you may know it as big red if you're from the south, or maybe false morel if you like to make certain mycologists mad who don't like the false term. But your Gyromitra species and related species. And you can kind of see that here, that Gyromitra-like kind of infolding braininess, but now in a nugget that you can find underground. And wow, if you get a chance to look at these spores, they're really beautiful. Also included are some tuber species, some of them newly described, like Tuber bermanii, or described way back from the 20s, like Tuber caniculatum. Tuber leonii was described, it's called the pecan truffle as a common name, but it was described from a basswood in Minnesota. So keep an eye on that one if they ever split that up. We're going to get to keep the name, us in the Midwest. Tuber leonii, as I was talking about it just now, highlight from the records. This is a observation from La Crosse County, actually, in 2005, collected by Alden Dirks and photographed by John Plischke. So I will say, is it edible? Yes. Is it tasty? Apparently, yes, when mature. That's what I've heard anyway. I haven't gotten to eat very much of this yet, so I'm just hearing stories. But, this one was turned up in Wisconsin. Going into the Basidiomycota. Here we've got Hymenogaster, Hysterangium, a number of Melanogaster species, and Melanogaster boomeratus. Brumianus was one of the really highly observed species in Wisconsin out of this data. It's also Variegatus, Melanogaster variegatus, and some Rhizopogons. Rhizopogon roseolus was, I think, one of the more observed ones out of the data. Pictured here is a Rhizopogon species currently identified just a Rhizopogon on iNaturalist and was observed by WMS's own Charlene Cliver. She's in our iNaturalist projects and sees a lot of cool stuff. So she found this one. It looks like in that sub-hypogea state, sort of sticking out from the earth. And I was highlighting here, pulling out a picture of just that, in this case, folded up, basically former pore surface. So it evolved out of a bolete lineage, and you can imagine the basidiospores all trapped in there and only going to be freed if some animal eats them. Okay, so another highlight, in this case, a photograph by Andrew Kitson and collected by Alden Dirks again, in this case, at Texas Island Woods State Natural Area, which is where we still will be doing a foray, I think, in this upcoming year, and then we did in this past year. So Texas Island Woods is very cool. This fungus, beautiful. It's not really considered tasty or anything. Nobody says it's toxic, and I think people have tried to eat it based on the field guide note I read saying it wasn't very tasty, which implies somebody tried. But really gorgeous truffle here. And this is where I say, hey, let's care about the diversity, not just for whether we can eat it, but what's it doing out there? And yeah, you can get some really cool photos too. And this is the example of Gymnodemania lactiflua. It was formerly an indigon. That's why I say AKA indigon. So there was only this one species of Gymnodemania observed in Wisconsin, and nobody else from the entire phylum of Mucoromycota truffles. So that's saying is to say we are just scratching the surface here. With only 60 total microportal records of truffle-forming fungi in Wisconsin. So all of those names I was going through of specific species, they only total up to 60 records in Wisconsin. So if you find another one and get it on microportal because it's been sequenced and put up there, that's maybe 61. So this one, just the edibility rating, I've not really heard of anybody eating Mucoromycota truffles. I'm not sure if it's really been tried. They seem kind of slimy. And on to Truffle Quest, maybe what a lot of people are here to get into. So you want to get out and find truffles. I did too. And it's both harder and easier, I think, than I was thinking. If you don't have a truffle dog, it's going to be a lot of persistence and a lot of hunting your likely spots. But let's get into it. Research objective number 2, Truffle Quest, collections of Midwest truffles. How do I look for truffle fungi? Well, I'm doing it legally, ethically, and I'm digging. So I'm led to those truffles, legally, ethically digging. So legally means you've got permits for the collections that you're making on whatever land you're on, whether it's your own land, okay, you have permission. Somebody else's private land, better be sure they gave you permission. Public land, look into the details there and find out not just about looking for fungi, but maybe check in with the land managers if you can find some contacts for them, because you're going to be digging. And digging kind of is a different story to what we're used to with just plucking a mushroom, right? You're getting under the soil and you might encounter things. You might encounter things like the roots of plants. You might encounter actually digging up an entire plant. You might encounter, whether you notice or not, you might encounter disturbing that layer, especially if you don't put it back. I always am replacing that soil and duff and not making a big disturbance, let alone leaving it. And you might also experience hitting archaeology. And that's something to sort of check the local, who would I report it to if I found something of archaeological or cultural significance? Is there anything in the place that I'm digging that might make me likely to run into that? What I'm saying is maybe don't be digging burial mounds unless you, I don't know, have the appropriate cultural permissions to do so and legal permissions. So that's my background there. I really love to actually just dig with my hands, and then to be a little bit safer than just digging with my hands, I put on a gardening glove, because when you're looking for these truffles, especially if they're smaller ones, or you're just not as used to uncovering them, I think having that tactile feel is really good. But maybe you still need to get through that top duff. So something like a cultivator tool that I've shown on the far left there is perfect. Just get a little rip into the duff and soil, top couple layers, and then maybe dig around with your hands, maybe in gardening gloves. I'll be honest, I dig with my bare hands, but I also get a lot of cuts on my hand. So do it whichever way you like. But how are you going to know where to dig? So there's more specific techniques I'm going to get into, but in general, you're going to want to learn as much as you can about what's been found before in your area. Maybe you ask me about looking at the mycoportal data. Maybe you go on to iNaturalist or Mushroom Observer and see what has been found. Maybe you read about it in the Field Guide to North American Truffles. You can also really get into the ecology of the ones that you're seeking. Is there any tree associates that are known that are listed in the literature and field guides? Is there anything stated about, oh, it likes this type of soil, or this one is really partial to being in areas that, have this type of kind of woodland, maybe more elevation or something. So get into the ecology, any specifics. There's not as much as I would like out there on specific species, for the same reason that we just don't have enough information on Midwest truffle species in general, but it's always worth a look. So also then identifying the likely story spots, which I'm going to get into the details of, and just keep looking. It's going to take effort. I've looked a lot. I found maybe a couple. I would describe myself as like I could count them on one hand, my memories of finding them. But then there's the question of, what if I could smell really, really good and I could actually smell my way to them? Well, then I might be a trained truffle dog, pig, or perhaps a squirrel on a leash. You could consider that too. So this is something that comes up a lot. What about a truffle dog? Why haven't you gotten a truffle dog, Mariah? Well, my apartment does not allow for dogs. And our lab is progressing on this, but does not yet have a trained truffle dog. Truffle dogs are so useful for finding truffles. I would say that the people who really find them, like every time they go out, they're going out with a truffle dog. Especially, they're also going to be finding you those mature truffles. If you're hunting for scientific interest, you want a mature truffle, because then you have mature spores to look at and mature features to look at. If you're looking for truffles for a culinary purpose, you want to eat them, or maybe you want to make an inoculation slurry of some native truffle or something, well, then you're also going to want mature truffles with mature spores. And the dog is going to be finding the truffles that smell. So you're going to be finding those mature truffles. So you can see here this truffle dog Rye, pictured with his person, Heather Dawson, on the right. He is, I'm not like a dog knower, but that's some kind of lab. And he's really cute. And the traits that he has that makes him a good truffle dog is he's engaged with smells. He does well with what's called scent work training. He wants to learn and work, and he responds to a reward. So specifically, Heather throws a ball, and then he gets it, and then that's the reward. So the reward is specific to the dog. And that's something people who know more about dog training can get more into. But I've also heard from Heather that using fresh truffles, whether you've got them and you maybe, I don't know how long freezing works, but you've kept them fresh, so that the smell is fresh, and you train the dog on those fresh smells, and the full range of smells of the truffle in question, not just like the one note you might get from a truffle oil. So that might be the fastest ways to train that I've heard of. So you can also be training not just on like a specific culinary truffle. You could be training truffle dogs and encouraging them to branch out. I'm not the expert on this, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but you can train them to find a huge amount of biodiversity. You look up Heather's iNaturalist page, and it's amazing what she's finding on a regular basis. And so you need to be training with a variety of truffles if you're doing that, and rewarding the exploration, apparently. Here's the Midwest Truffle Quest advice I've received as just a lowly human going out there and digging and trying to just try my luck. So focusing on those trees, as I mentioned, and I'm listing here some big hitters for tuber: hazelnuts, oaks, hickories, pine, spruce, basswood or linden, beech, aspen, and elm. I highlight those ones because I think they're commonly encountered in Wisconsin, and they're ones that are frequently associated with tuber truffle species, which is what a lot of people will be looking for if you're interested in culinary truffles. I put up in the right-hand corner there a wider list of species I found in any given paper anywhere that I could encounter about species of tree that tuber associates with. And you can get into this data for any genus too. And pretty much one tip I heard from Dr. Roseanne Healy was any ectomycorrhizal tree. There's such a diversity of truffles out there, and so many of them have ectomycorrhizal associations. You look up, what are some ectomycorrhizal trees? Or you ask someone on a WMS foray, what are some ectomycorrhizal trees? Check around them. Go to areas, pretty much just if you're avoiding non-ectomycorrhizal trees, maples are not particularly ectomycorrhizal. They're not actually at all. So other places to check is always low spots with extra moisture. Anywhere where you think moisture has been in this spot and it's been there consistently. It's not maybe been totally underwater, but it's more likely to have kept moist throughout the year. Also for truffles, particularly tuber truffles, prioritizing sandy loam soils. You could get your hands on a soil map online, or there's print versions, and look at that. Or just get out there and get your hands in the dirt and figure out, is that a sandy loam? You're looking for the sand for the mineral-rich, loose soils that they give. And also you can look at a higher pH, something in the like mid-upper, like 7.5 to 8, like pH is apparently pretty good for finding tuber. How to find them continued, look for animal digs. Everybody who I've heard from who finds truffles regularly as a person is looking and getting a really good feel for animal digs. This picture right here is a dig on campus, and it's almost certainly not a truffle dig, but I checked it out anyway. Say almost certainly not a truffle dig because it was a pretty shallow dig, and apparently truffle digs are more likely to be deeper or more wide or like more engaged. I haven't really gotten my eyes on that yet, like my intuitive sense of it. So I just check every one I see, or if I see a lot of digs in an area, I will go check it out. And you can find little bits of truffle left, perhaps, if they got disturbed at the bottom of the hole. And you could also maybe find truffles they missed or didn't go for because they weren't mature in the general area. If you're looking for truffle diversity, or maybe you're collecting for getting sequencing, you could try collecting mitotic spore mats. So these are Something that Pezzezo might see, so things in that class, maybe even it might be specific to the Pezzazales. I haven't yet quite determined which one we want to go with for that, but this is mats on the top of the surface. You'll see these white clumpy mats that get formed. In this case, this is a spore mat made by Pachyphoides species here. And Roseanne Healy's research goes into detail on mitotic spore mats if you're interested, and I can answer questions about those later. But they might indicate activity in the area if you see these white spots on the ground from Pezizomycete fungi. You can also find them by finding their parasites. So the famous example, and really the example I know, is Tolipocladium, in this case Tolipocladium ophioglossoides, this little black earth tongue-looking thing sticking up out of the ground. It's black, so it's still kind of hard to see, but it's easier to see than a truffle if it's underground. So you can find the Tolipocladium and then start digging. And Rose Tercy actually found a bunch of the Elaphomyces this way at Mycelium Mysteries, digging around the Tolipocladium and actually got it connected with the golden thread. Golden thread because it'll be like this thick yellow gold mycelium that's connecting the Tolipocladium fungus parasite to its Elaphomyces host. And you're not going to have a good time eating the Elaphomyces, but you'll see some really cool truffle diversity. Here's an example of truffle size varying a lot. So get your eye trained for either finding this big honking kind of thing, like the truffle on the left, or something teeny tiny, like smaller than a fingernail, like this truffle on the right. I have found mostly the teeny ones so far for tuber species, and they're interesting. You at first feel like, how could I ever find that? And then you're messing around the dirt and you just keep turning them up. And following along those root tips, if you find one and it's an ectomycorrhizal, they're going to be kind of near the root tip a lot of times. So you can just kind of find in the area of the tree that it's associated with. So this is kind of the final part of my research. Bonus, species description. I'm still intimidated by species description, but that's why we do it, right? That's why it's going to be a good part of my research so that I learn about how to do that. So this is one called tuber 44. It already has a number because it's already been described phylogenetically, so in sequencing data, but it's not been described, as in described fully as a species based on collections and a deeper look at its traits. So how did I get it? How did I get my hands on this truffle? Because I will tell you, it wasn't really just my own efforts, unless we count the efforts of being in WMS and having friends. It was knowing a guy, specifically this guy, Arnie Martinson, featuring flying squirrels that he was observing. So the story here goes that Arnie had heard about those truffle squirrel connections, and he had also heard about truffle hazelnut connections. Like, it's famous in Europe to grow truffles and hazelnuts together. And so when he was observing flying squirrel activity beneath a hazelnut tree on his property, he knew what to do. Pictured there, the hazelnut tree. Pictured on the right there, Arnie. Not pictured holding truffles. Those are boletes. But under those top, like just a couple centimeters of sandy soil, he was rooting around and found truffles. And he's eaten them, reported them as good. I haven't tried eating them yet. But when I started getting into truffles, when I started research at UW-La Crosse, he very graciously offered me the chance to dig for them myself and take them as specimens. And I was curious about this. It was the very first time I actually felt confident that, okay, I've seen a truffle in person. I've dug it up. And we dig. Dig is what we did. So what did we find? What I found when I went back to the lab and sequenced the section of DNA called the ITS region, which is used as a barcode sequence, so a sequence that changes a lot very quickly in evolution, and therefore is really good to sequence and track changes and decide, okay, this is a different species. So the ITS sequence did match to something already in database records for truffle genome data, and it was matching, though, to an undescribed species, something that had been given the moniker tuber 44 in the Bonito Labs code for it. So Dr. Greg Bonito is at Michigan State University. And it's in the maculatum clade. So I've listed some other tuber species there that are also in the maculatum clade. What do I mean by clade? I'll get into it, but it's basically a category beneath the genus but above species, saying it's more related to tuber maculatum and its relatives than other tuber truffles. And here's its very pretty picture. You can see it's very like coconut, or not coconut, but like cocoa brown, and has really nice sort of tiny fairy potato look to it. Pretty smooth on the outside, little bit of texture to it. It's not very big, but it's still there. And you can find a lot of them. When we found them, you tend to just kind of keep popping them out. And I wrote down like sort of the smell profile of this truffle, and it really did have like kind of a nutty, rich, good taste. Though the maculatum clade is apparently not that known for being a culinary clade, but I would agree that while I haven't eaten it, it smells good. And here's its spores. So I'm still getting better microscopy photos for this, but you can tell here that they are large and they have these reticulations, this ornamentation that is reticulate. It's like a honeycomb pattern on the outside of these spores. And they've been stained here with a blue stain, so they're more visible, but their regular color is brown. And they have this, they're really big. I haven't measured them yet, but they are big. So I have a lot more to do. As you can tell by me saying I haven't measured the spores yet, I have a lot more to do for species description. That's going to be in this coming semester. So just really quick for people who are interested in the clades, and you might want to take a picture of the slide because I'm not going to go into every detail. But as of 2024, tuber is broken down into 13 clades, and they're named after the species that's taken as the type, like the kind of almost the type or the representative of that clade. So the gibosum clade is based on near relatives, things that are breaking out as related mostly to tuber gibosum. And in North America, that includes species like tuber gibosum and tuber organense. So I listed the 13 clades there, but here are the 6 clades that I've found references in the literature so far for being found in North America. Rufum clade, it has the famous tuber leonii, the pecan truffle. And then highlighting again that the maculatum clade is what tuber 44 is in. And there are clades that are basically more or less known for different traits. Like I said, maculatum, apparently not that known for culinary truffles, so far as I was reading, but tuber 44 has good odors. So I would say we could try eating it more like Arnie has. More about tuber 44 collection. So another little one there, and also showing again Steve and Sam and Eileen, who I dug around their tree, Sam and Eileen's tree. So I've made another collection from Arnie's tree in 2025 following the 2024 collection, and also dug in August of 2025 around a different hazelnut tree, the one with Sam and Eileen. And also I have a collection sent to me very graciously by Kim Dassow, who got in touch with me through Facebook. And I haven't sequenced it yet, but it kind of based on the morphology and that it was with a hazelnut nearby, might be tuber 44. So where else has it been found? In the environmental sequence data, so just not data from actual truffle collections, but data that was sequenced from the roots of orchids, specifically Epipactis helleborine. Tuber 44, the species I'm describing, has been found in there. So tuber also forms what's called orchid mycorrhizae, which was news to me. So pictured there in the corner is on the inside of a orchid root. You have these things called pelotons where the mycelium has been drawn in, the fungus has been drawn in and then kind of forms these little nodules in there, and the orchid is drawing them in and is then taking, maybe trading, maybe taking, maybe a little both, depending on the time, nutrients from the fungus. So in this case, Tuber, in general, the whole genus, is known multiple times over to form these associations. And not only that, they're known to be having evidence that they're in that trading relationship. They weren't just drawn into the roots and then just kind of accidentally end up in there. They are in an active trading relationship, with some of the evidence being that there's nitrogen enrichment in the orchid, comparable to the nitrogen that the truffle puts into its own truffles. For tuber species, and that this nitrogen levels, heavy nitrogen levels, is comparable to, is more when associated with tuber compared to other ECM or ectomycorrhizal fungi, is what the ECM is standing for there. So in general, what that's saying is, hey, tuber truffles are associated with orchids, and they are in this sort of active relationship of being orchid mycorrhizae. So that is in addition to their relationships with trees, which is an ectomycorrhizal situation, different sort of relationship. And this was really interesting to me on a lot of ecosystem question levels, like, are they in there and connected to a tree? I couldn't find anything about that yet. Are they in there in those orchids and not connected to trees anymore and just able to move around with the orchid? I learned from somebody who's studying orchid mycorrhizae at UW La Crosse that once in the roots of the orchid, they can actually, quote unquote, leave. They can grow back out sometimes, the fungi that are associated. So there's a lot going on there, potentially, for ecosystem interactions that we don't even know about, including invasive species of plants. So Epipactis helleborine, not the orchid pictured there, but its relative, that my tuber 44 was found in, it's not native to North America. It's here. It's definitely here, but it's spreading invasively in North America. It's kind of a weedy orchid. So that's sort of been really cool to me, ecosystem sidebar. More collections I'm requesting material from. These are all collections that have been made in the past couple of years, except for this one from Quebec, which was really interesting. It was collected but not described based on it. So the description work is separate from the discovery of finding the thing. And these are more that will allow me to look at a lot of different examples. And I'd also like to highlight this because it shows sort of the range. We found findings of them from Quebec and Arizona and also Minnesota. So we'll be looking into that. And this is the end of my presentation, but not the end of my research. As you can tell, I have a lot of work left to do, and this is a lot of loose threads here at the end. But my main takeaway, truffles for you, are truffle-forming fungi are central in their ecosystems, but they're very undersampled for the Midwest. So we should be giving them some love. We should be putting them in inventories, collecting them, sequencing them, describing them, telling our friends about them. And I really encourage that if you're cultivating truffles, encourage your supplier to go for native species. Be like, hey, I would love to grow tuber caniculatum. How can I get my hands on that? And I also think it's a good loops right back into that collecting and describing work, that finding those good candidates locally and highlighting them is a really good way to go. So it's the end. So thank you. And to the Q&A. Just have my thanks slide here for everybody. UW La Crosse, and my thesis committee, I'll read them out: Dr. Arthur Group, Dr. Todd Osmondson, Beth Paluch, Dr. Greg Bonito from Michigan State University. Also, I had here the image of that field guide I was telling you guys about, the Field Guide to North American Truffles. Really nice book and a really good one for our region so far. And a lot of thank yous on this screen also to other people who've invited me to talk, provided me with resources in the form of money, or perhaps truffles themselves, like Arnie and Kim Dasso, and a lot of help, because I am new to this, and vouchering specimens at our very own Bayfield Rustic Camping Fry, because guess where that hazelnut tree is that we find? Maybe I shouldn't tell people this. I don't want you to eat them all. I need to make collections. But at some point, we'll need to record more about what it tastes like. But yeah, it's at our 4As that we found this species, or Arnie found it and then he let me have it. So thank you so much. And I will get to the Q&A. Okay, and it only took over an hour. Um, I usually read the questions, but now I feel weird because I've been talking so long.
Do you want me to read them to you, Mariah?
Yeah.
Okay. Give me just a second. I know one was um hold on about pizizomycete. I would love more information on why pizizomycete fungi make meiotic spore mats and what exactly are they and what is the function?
Thank you so much for that question because I really wanted to go into the details, but I knew I was going to be running long because I love this topic of truffles in general. But mitotic spore mat. So the mitotic part is like mitosis. So that's when a cell is dividing and it's dividing without, not for sexual reproduction. It's just making a, what could be, but it's just regular reproduction. It's like making a plain split of itself. So yeah, you can imagine like yeasts budding. They're not making, whereas when I say splitting for sexual reproduction, I'm talking about, let's say, like making an egg or a sperm, that you're splitting your uh, um, chromosomes, your genetic information in half, and then it can recombine later. This is making a plain split. So this is me getting into the weeds there a little bit, but yeah, when we're splitting by mitosis, we're just popping off clones of ourselves. And those mats are allowing these pizizomycete fungi to not only have sexual reproduction with their cups or whatever structure, their truffle or their cups, they are making these little mats just directly on the soil. So who else is in pizizomycete class? Morels. So morels can make these too, apparently, and they will just show up as these little white, or there's other ones in other colors like yellow, depending on the species. And I made a whole project on iNaturalist to track them, so I will get that link for you guys. But because yeah, there's not a lot. Dr. Roseanne Healy got into the research of them. If you look up like mitotics, if you mitospore mats, you can find some of her research. Here is the paper. I'll put it in the chat for you guys. And yeah, they're very interesting. So it's a way to get clones of themselves out really quick. I assume it's probably quicker than making a whole fruiting body. And I was highlighting them because they're another way to sort of observe these fungi, including the truffle fungi in the pizizomycetes. And Roseanne has a whole protocol for how to collect them and then collect them clean enough that you can examine them microscopically and sequence them later too. So yeah.
Okay, the next question is when you find an animal dig, about how far around that do you check for truffles they may have missed?
Yeah, it totally depends. So how much are the bugs biting? Do my knees hurt? Like, yeah, I like, well, and how many digs? Is there a lot of, if there's so many digs in an area, I'm much more motivated. I'm much more like, this is a good spot. This is a good moment. If it's just one dig, maybe I don't invest so much time. But I'm usually just, this is what I've done. I'm not an expert at this. I'm not like a commercial forager for truffles, but I've been going down about this much, like maybe about half a foot maximum, and usually not even that deep, but like maximum I'll go down that deep, and then sort of a radius like this around, and then maybe I'll skip a stop. I'll be like, what if I went? What if I imagined? I don't know if this is a good tip, but this is what I've been doing because I know there with the root tips. If I see the root, if I find a root tip, I'll try to follow that little like tippy bit of the root of the tree around in that. Like if I found that in the hole, I'll try to keep kind of following that. So it's really contextual. How good do you feel the spot is? How are you feeling? How much time do you have? And also, how much disturbance do you feel comfortable with making in this space? So if there were a lot of little rare orchids around or a bunch of trilliums, maybe I would be a little bit more careful. If I felt like it was just kind of plain leaf litter, I didn't see a lot going on, I felt like I could put the scene back together, I would um, take a bigger chunk.
Okay, and
Somebody with
next,
her hand up too, if we wanted to take a pause for someone who wanted to
oh,
speak.
sure. Go ahead.
Sylvia, maybe? You might have to unmute yourself. Okay, there you go.
Yep. Oops. Sorry. Hello, my name is Sylvia. By the way, I'm brand new, um, and I'm really excited. So I'm going to say right away, I'm half French, half Italian, and my half Italian happened to be from Umbria, which is the highest producer of truffles in Italy. One of my cousin actually breeds truffle dogs, not the Tuscan style, the Legotto, but they're smaller. And
Mm.
I am feeling immense guilt because when I go to visit, eventually there's always a moment where I go, truffles again, you know.
Oh.
I feel so bad. It's like, oh, you've seen three. Oh my God. My cousin one time actually. So we have a lot of oak trees, which is why there's a question in there in the chat that says, when um, do you pick it up? Because like in Umbria, we have the summer one, the fall one, which is a white one, which is the most how you say it, priced.
Mm.
I mean, we basically have around the year and they change. We have the black one, the spring one is also good. So do you even worry about that right now in your research? Is it one of the elements that you look at? What season?
It is. And I'm just gonna like also put a typed answer on that one in the chat. But what I was told when I started out is because so many of them are ectomycorrhizal, we go with what we call the ectomycorrhizal season for our region. So for our region, that's like July-ish through October-ish with a big peak in September, like
Okay.
late August. So that would be when we're not only finding truffles, but we're most likely to find them fresh and at maturity. But I said never say never because number one, when you have so much undescribed biodiversity, who knows? Maybe we have our own um, one that matures at the very end of the fall and then freezes over the winter and then thaws out in the
Mm-hmm.
spring, like it finishes itself off or something. Like we
Mm-hmm.
don't entirely know. And I've definitely heard also never say never in that the squirrels miss them too. They might be good at finding them, but they miss them too. And I've heard another a PhD candidate, I think, researcher at with the lab, Dr. Greg Bonito's lab in Michigan State University. Um, Judd um, found Judd Van Wyck found them in the winter in February, I believe it was, on
Oh
his
wow.
campus, and that was pretty inspiring to me because I was like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
on his campus, he's digging around and he finds them in February." Okay, Judd,
Mm-hmm.
um, I am jealous.
Right. So that's my last follow-up question. Um, so is the fact that there is so much we still have to learn from, you know, tuber in general in North America because there's not the culture of eating truffle in America?
Yeah, there's not the culture of eating tuber truffle, particularly on the everything west of the Pacific Northwest, basically.
Okay.
That is, or foraging for it. If we have a culture of eating it, we have a culture of importing it from Europe and eating it
Right,
for
right,
the most part, or
right,
getting the ones from the Pacific Northwest, importing them from there. So there's ones native over there
right.
that are also tasty, like those Lucangium species. But I'll just also say the book that I had does include, like, it'll say it's it'll say like May through September for
Oh, okay,
veterinary
okay.
guys. So you
So
can
that's a
find,
field guide.
yeah, this is a field guide and it's got some of those answers on a species by species
Right,
basis.
right. I'm definitely going to get it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'll be at the get together. There's one coming up. I don't know if it's a medicine one. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sylvia.
Okay.
All right. Steph Lee asks, are there any other types of squirrels that search for truffles other than flying squirrels?
Yeah, I would say as a non-expert in every little last aspect of squirrel ecology, but I feel like if you're a squirrel, you're going to look for a truffle. I've heard of like the red squirrel. I've heard of the flying squirrels being like, wow, they love them, and red squirrels being like very interested in eating fungi in general. And yeah, I would say any kind of squirrel would probably be finding a truffle and eating it if they did find it. So if you find your big gray squirrel in your neighborhood, yeah, that one could find a truffle too.
Cool. All right, let me go back to the chat. Um, when are you supposed to be looking? Okay, we got that one already. Um, oh, is there any other kind of animal besides squirrels that you feel like are good indicators of truffles being in the area?
Yeah. Like just seeing them alone. I don't know if I've heard of anybody who's like a regular like forager to be like, oh yeah, seeing this animal here tells me that digging tells me. But if I saw a deer being really interested in digging, I would probably be like, maybe there's a Laphomyces or other truffles that they're interested in eating. Because also I don't really know what deers dig for otherwise. Maybe they eat roots. Any little like vole, there's so many voles and shrews and all of these other little um, creatures that you're not going to see very likely unless you're lucky because they stay underground most of their life. So I would say they're mostly finding them because they're underground. But if you saw a lot of vole activity in an area, maybe. If you were interested, there are a good number of papers out there where they collect the poop of little mammals and sequence things in there or look at the spores in there, and you can kind of find out some of the statistics. In some parts of the world, birds are implicated as eating truffles. And so, any ecosystem interaction you see, if you see like a crow eating a fungus, take a picture or a video and try to collect that fungus because so many of these interactions are under described and underreported. Um, yeah, that's what I have to say about that. I might look a little bit more into the details there for more, but
Okay.
I think any of those little mammals, little rodents.
So the next question is Matt is asking, are the truffle cultivators using Midwest hazelnuts? Are they using a water-based system to impregnate the plants or slurry/soil amendment affixation? He says, I know that truffle tree farms use hydroponic system to inoculate the roots prior to planting the trees.
That's a cool question, and definitely for somebody who knows more about the cultivation aspect than I do, because I haven't really like physically done that myself, so I don't really feel like I've gotten too much of a handle on it yet. But so far as I had read in the literature, I was seeing them talking about making slurries and like the soil amendment fixation. That was like what I was reading about with like the pecan orchard um, inoculations. So I actually don't know. I thought I saw actually Steve show up here if you want to comment about that. If you don't want to, Steve, that's okay too.
No, that's fine. Thanks for the lead in here. Um, the uh, the Midwest hazelnuts hybrid Americana hybrids are not usually the ones that are being inoculated. The Avalana on the East Coast and West Coast have traditionally been the ones that have been inoculated, but uh, most of the current hazelnut inoculation, regardless of the species in the background, have been with slurry inoculations, and not just for hazelnuts, but for pine, for not just for Canaliculatum, but for Borkii, for example. The traditional slurry soil amendment or slurry specifically in the nursery is probably the go-to protocol for that right now. But um, I think hydroponics is a really good idea. Um, so I'll just leave it at that.
Cool. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, next question. Max Reinhardt asked, have you heard much about the winemakers in California and the association with truffle growth with grapes?
I have heard about from actually Steve about like wine orchards and truffles being associated there, but I hadn't. What do you, curious, Max? Do you mean like associations with grapes, like being grown with them, or like a claim that they're actually like associating with the plant?
Yeah, well, I just, just randomly, but maybe a couple years ago, I just heard there is some attempt at, I don't know if you call it inoculation or whatever, or association, or a mycorrhizal sort of attempt at, development that way. But yeah, it seems to be a thing, and I've heard it like a couple times, a few times, but not much about it. But
Huh. I
yeah,
had not heard about it at all, so this is the joys of presenting. I get to hear about something for the first time, and I was like, "Are grapes mycorrhizal?" Because usually we think about trees for mycorrhizal, and most of the rest of plants on the planet Earth have arbuscular mycorrhizae and endomycorrhizae, where they're like going into the root and not just on the outside. But again, never say never with fungi and plants. I putting in the chat there a link to me just searching grapes mycorrhizal, and they're talking about AMF. So, it seems like that is what is current, but in that it's not ectomycorrhizal, which would mean that tuber truffle with grapes as a mycorrhizal connection, I would say probably not, but I will say never, but it's probably that they're using kind of a land use or agroforestry model if they're growing grapes and maybe growing something else. And I don't know. This is another one where I might say, like, I don't know if Steve's heard of this, but
The California orchards or vineyards that have truffle events have the truffle orchard separate from the vineyard space itself. They are not ectomycorrhizal hosts for the most part. I've never seen it in literature ever, um, but it's in the luxury food production world. If you're there for an experience in the winery and tasting rooms, they are now offering in a handful of locations in California. They're offering successful tours, forays into the truffle orchards. Although there are some very specific um, uh, contamination limits that they will allow, because anything that gets trampled in will essentially contaminate a very expensive crop. And so mostly dogs and the dog handlers are the ones that go to actually get to hunt for them on a large scale. But that's kind of the California story.
yeah. And I actually just bringing up a sidebar on that, though, there is also another kind of luxury food slash alcohol production market with whiskey or bourbon and truffles, because I'm going to link this as well. Story about the discovery of 2 new species of truffles in 2025 with tuber Cani revelatum, which is named after like revealed by dog, canis or dogs. So discovered by dogs, and they were just so thankful to the dogs, they named it after them. That species, and then tuber cumberlandens, named after the Cumberland Plateau in Tennessee, where it's found. So these were found, and then like I think they were saying that Maker's Mark, producers of bourbon, were interested in cultivating the native species of tuber cumberlandens with oak trees, because they're storing their they're storing their whiskey in oak barrels. So they grow oak trees. And then they could grow truffles that were native truffles with those oaks that would be reforesting and replacing ones that are cut down for barrels. I thought that was cool. So that's some interest in growing some native species.
Okay, we have another question. Tony Hoffman asks, is there a good source you would recommend for tuber canaliculatum samples?
This is another one where I've gotten stuff from, which is Steve. But so far, I would say reach out to truffle researchers. Perhaps they might get back to you, like Greg Bonito or Matt Smith down in Florida. Don't want to put them out there as saying, yeah, they're a supplier, Steve might also know more about this than me, about how to actually get your hands on inoculum.
For what it's worth, the culinary world um, has deep pockets, and for the most part, especially the canaliculatum is on back order probably for the next few years, uh, just so people can experience it in a restaurant environment.
Mm,
Hundreds of dollars an ounce sometimes, which
wow.
is pretty exorbitant. If you're looking for some just to sample, it's probably best to track down a restaurant that promotes it and have a great meal in the meantime. But if you do look for inoculum, it gets pretty pricey because everybody is working against that same culinary pressure dollar. So there you go.
Yeah. I guess I might go out looking in, oak woodlands. I mean, it's canaliculatum or tecan is it's from our region. We could find it by digging, and it's a really pretty one if you look it up. It's got really characteristic like red spike, like almost little pyramids all in its outer peridium. Oh, I think Brandon's putting a picture in the chat. Yep, very beautiful.
There's a question about the peridium, actually. Any sense of what the thickness of the peridium is associated with?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's because of the diversity of truffles. It's probably not going to be one answer. It's probably going to be adapted for lots of different things, or maybe just not adapted, but just a legacy of what it that lineage evolved from. I've heard recently it explained that like the peridium of a basidiomycete truffle, you could think of it as like what happened to the pileus or that outer thin layer of the cap. Has it sequestrated itself up into a nugget? So I guess if you're evolving from, like, say, a bolete with a pretty thin pileus to its cap, you become your ancestor was that, and then generations down the line, you're evolved to a new species that's a truffle former. That peridium is going to be that thickness. Now, what is it serving? A thick peridium, maybe it's related to if I was like spitballing, this is not me answering based on like knowledge. This is just like imagining. Could imagine a thicker peridium helping me get through the winter more intact. I could imagine a thinner peridium, meaning that I'm going to be able to be eaten or have odor compounds come out through that peridium faster. There's probably a whole dynamics there to think about. So that's why I say really good question and whole line of stuff beyond my research.
Sarah asks, if we find truffles, do you want them sent to you? Do you want samples or anything? Or like, how would you want them recorded? What would you want people to do with the truffles that they find?
I would love for people, if they wanted to be truffling for science, to take photographs with the location data or record where you are. So if you have location data on your phone, you'll take a picture on your phone, or if your camera collects location, you'll get that. So something to tell me where you were, a picture in the environment to be like, oh, there it is. And the environment in the picture could tell me more about what was going on. Plus, you could maybe say, oh, I found it next to this tree. That would be nice too. And then a picture of it whole, and either you cut it open fresh and take a picture of that, or you leave it whole and get it to me quick while it's still fresh, or maybe you dehydrate it and get it to me. And you could cut it in half maybe and dehydrate it. And dehydrating like you would a specimen for research. So that's on low temperatures, like a 90 degrees Fahrenheit to 100-ish degrees Fahrenheit. Low temperatures because DNA kind of, I guess, gets kind of cooked, and it's easier to get extracted DNA if you've not dried it at higher temperatures. You could also, if you really wanted to invest in I'm not going to say the fancy stuff because it's not that like expensive or anything or hard to use, but for gentle, no heat dehydration, people get silica gel pellets. Especially like the ones that are blue, they'll like turn color to show you that they've taken the water out of something. And you just need a few of them usually in with a truffle, unless it was totally soaked, in which case maybe let it air dry. Anyway, all these details to say there's all these collection protocols I could give you a write-up on if you want. So reach out to me and say, I found this truffle. Taking the pictures is why I'm getting, would be something you need to do in the moment. And I would love to take it and sequence it and add that to the databases. And you can make your observation on iNaturalist or Mushroom Observer, and I could put the sequence data right there on your observation and have it be available publicly to you too. So yeah, just get in touch.
Yeah, I think iNat
listed
would be a great place to put it, like, even if you don't know what it is, at least we could have a recording of where it was found and all that stuff. And then, get it to Mariah, and maybe we could actually get a sequence on it. That's awesome. Next question. Actually, I have a question, and then I'm going to ask the other person's question as well. So this, like, tuber 44, you said that, we have found this one with the hazelnut trees. So that is a signal that this is a mycorrhizal association with the hazelnut tree. But then the same thing is found inside of an orchid. So it's also arbuscular, like it's an endo. So is it possible that this mushroom has like two different life cycles? Like, because I've never heard of that before. And it just seems fascinating that it would possibly be both things in different scenarios.
Yeah, in this case with the orchid mycorrhizae, it's kind of its own. The way I understand it, it's a whole area that is new-ish to me too. Like it's something I know much less about compared to ectomycorrhizal associations, and is also kind of an emerging field of like weirdness. But in general, what I understand so far is that it's probably not while completing like a whole sexual life cycle while it's associated with the orchid. I don't think that's why I was trying to figure out in the literature, like, is it able to have its mycelium go into the orchid roots and still be connected to an ectomycorrhizal associate tree? Or is it like it's being drawn in to the orchid root and now it's captured and now it's there? And even though I was hearing some reports that sometimes the mycelium can kind of like grow back out, or it's been observed to do that at least. I don't know under what conditions, but basically what's going on here. And to what degree is this part of the tuber's life cycle, or to what degree is this really just the orchid show and the tuber's just kind of along for the ride and has been diverted from its usual life cycle? Or usual like dynamic in the ecosystem. I don't know this. And that's why I was like, had to have a slide on it, because I was like, this is news to me personally.
Wild.
News even to people who really know a good amount about truffles. So it's been in the literature, but like it's just something we just don't talk about a lot, so far as I can tell.
Well, it's super cool to hear that. I just thought it was like when you started talking about that, I was like, I had one of those moments. I was like, what? Wait, this should not be, but it is. So that's really special. It's really, really different. And I hope everyone can kind of see how amazing and how flexible that is with that organism, like the relationships that, organisms can have with each other. Another question from the chat was, are the smells pretty similar between, I'm assuming it means like within a genus,
Sure. Yeah, because genus to genus can be really, really different. And I would say species to species can be really different from what I can tell. Again, I'm pretty new to this in terms of like actually getting my hands in the dirt and encountering them in person. But from reading descriptions of the odors, including ones in the field guide or ones that people on iNaturalist find, and if they're diligent and they write what it smells like, which is pretty important for a truffle. So always, and just I will always plug this: always smell your fungus. It's a if you have any sense of smell, and you can build up your sense of smell and your ability to describe it, it's a really good dimension, and it's like you have a chemical detector in your nose. So there's whole charts online of, if you look up some of the research on I'm going to type this word in the chat, the volatome. I hope I've spelled it right, but the volatile, the world, or omics, or like the world of sensory volatile compounds that these things produce that can be detected and named chemically. You can read about some of like the odor causing compounds. A lot of them are like garlicky, but I read about one that Heather found that was banana smelling.
Wow. Uh,
There's a pretty wide range. And when you
that was Danielle Nodoff. Ooh, are you there? Oh no. Am I the only
Yes,
person that sees
I'm
her?
here.
Okay.
Is
Well,
Mikasa?
yeah, so I'm sorry that it seems like Mariah might be having some technical difficulties, but I was just gonna mention that my own experience with truffle, because I was there when Mariah found her truffle underneath the hazelnut tree. And that one smells, when she said it smells more like a nut, I would agree with that. It smells more like a hazelnut, or like something like a nut. It smells more nutty and like a little earthy. Obviously, it had a little dirt on it, but like very mild smelling versus, when I have gone, I did go to Italy once. I was really lucky on my honeymoon to be able to go, and I had black truffle shaved onto my pasta, and you could smell black truffle. It's very pungent. Like when they're, shaving it in front of you, you're like kind of like, oh my gosh, this definitely has an incredible smell to it and an incredible flavor. Like it's a pungent smell and a pungent flavor. And I would say that the hazelnut truffle, I don't think it likely has anywhere near that kind of flavor. It certainly does not have that kind of smell to it. So, and that's all that was, within the tuber genus. That's tuber canalagatum or whatever. And then there's that was the black truffle is tuber melanosporum that I ate in Italy. So very big difference between two species of the same genus there.
Well, I asked the question because if you were training a dog to sniff out truffles, would it only be one variety that it would find, or is it a close enough um, profile that it would find this one and that one, or
I think if you were gonna
that's
be
wide open?
Melissa,
training that, oh, I'm sorry, you're back.
no,
Okay,
that's
great.
okay. No, I didn't know if you knew I was back.
No, I had
You
no
would
idea.
probably be able to answer this like I could, but I will say I have had some of this conversation with Heather where like she's trained Rye, and I think Heather and her sister would be really good people to reach out to on like that biodiversity training. That really, because from what I understood about what she was saying, it's like no, they're not necessarily going to the dogs that are being trained, say on Lucangium organens, the like Pacific Northwest, like Oregon black truffle. If you train them just on that and you keep rewarding just on that, that's what they're going for. They're not only picking up on one odor, they're picking up on a huge realm of odors. So even if these truffle species share notes, the dog can tell, just like you wouldn't out of a lineup. They say point out, Bob, and Bob. You wouldn't point at like his brothers. Bob by his face, and that's specific. So if you've been trained to point out Oregon black truffle, you're not going to you're a dog, you see that full face of that smell, and you're going to keep pointing out exactly that unless you've been encouraged early in your training to go for some diversity. I mean, she described it as like in a really good talk she gave at MSA about the Mycological Society of America conference. It was like she talked about it kind of like imagining what it was like being in the mind of this dog who's been trained on a lot of different truffles, like this sort of scent map or prediction of what she'll care about. And then Rye is able to find things with odors that, from her perspective, they've not encountered before. But he's making that jump to try for it. So I would say if you were trying to go for diversity or maybe more than one truffle species, train on more than one. And then
Yeah,
encourage, if
that's what
you're
I
going
was
for
gonna
big
say too.
diversity, keep encouraging, like, oh, you found me a weird thing underground, then you reward that too. Meanwhile, if you're trying to get the dog to focus just in on, say, 3 tuber species, train on those 3 tuber species and reward only on those 3.
Okay.
That's my sense of things based on what people have told me. So
The next question is, are there any toxic truffles?
I haven't heard of any. And I've listened to some other more, like more established truffle researchers than me, which is most all of them, get asked this question and they've said sort of like a never say never and no. Um, like never say never because there's so much undescribed and it, as I said, becoming a truffle is you could imagine multiple different lineages. There might be a lineage that was toxic that also has a truffle form. So don't just like be cautious, but not terrified. And if you were trying something for the first time, try to make sure you can ID it to genus at least and know that it's in a genus that's known to be non-toxic overall, like tuber. Um, as always, when trying something new, you try a small amount. If you find something that's way off base, that's probably a send it to me or a researcher or some other researcher type of situation because you don't know what it is. Don't eat it. So that's my answer on that. But I don't know of any toxic. If anyone hears of any toxic truffle farmers, let me know.
Well, I think that's about it for questions. I think we made it through, unless anyone else wants to like unmute and ask anything in person.
Oh yeah, somebody did ask about, sir, Mary noted about scleroderma. There are things you could confuse. This is a really good point. There's things you could confuse for a truffle too that could be toxic, like scleroderma, the earth balls, or like poison skin. I think poison pig skin puffball or something like that. It's a common name for one of them, but scleroderma are can be toxic and they are ball shaped and they can also be what we would call the subhypogees. In fact, some people might consider them a truffle, I guess. I didn't, my committee told me I didn't have to, but yeah, scleroderma could be something. Or like an amanita egg, right? Before the amanita pops out of its universal veil egg shaped thing. If you don't know what those look like, look up amanita egg. I'll write it because I know. Look up what those look like. And that could also be toxic if it was a toxic species of amanita. And it could be round, and maybe if the dirt went around it, it might be kind of ruffled looking. I see a question in chat. I'm trying to figure iNaturalist. I need confirmation I'm doing it correctly. Please feel free to text me. And I have said before when I do iNaturalist trainings, like I will meet with people one-on-one at your own time to like help you in detail if you want.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to I took the app into my phone and I have pictures from like a few years ago. Um I'm in Wapaka, so I've been taking pictures from 5 years ago of all the mushrooms that I've discovered because I didn't know about mushrooms and but I thought they were cool. So I'm going through my phone and loading them onto iNaturalist. And I just did the second picture today. So I don't know if I'm hitting the right buttons so that you can see them. But I am putting like I'm finding them in Wapaka and this is the picture. And I know my phone gives the date. So it was like a 2023 picture. And then I just put a note in. I haven't seen this mushroom since then. So
Okay,
I don't know if that helps out.
If it's uploaded, if it shows up as an observation, like in your list of observations, you've successfully uploaded it. So it's available on iNaturalist. And if I were to know your iNaturalist username and go to it, I could find that and I could look at it. And there's people who've already seen it, no doubt, who like search up what fungi have been observed. And there's no limit on the year. So if you iNaturalist started somewhere in I think like the 2015 area, but if you were to have observed something and had pictures of it from way back in 1970, so far as I understand it, as long as you put in the correct information, it's all good. And it will go up there and it should be like a picture of the actual observation.
I'll keep trying. Yeah, I'll keep trying, but look for me if it's working.
You know what your iNat username is? Oh.
I believe it's Cheap Daisy. Cheap Daisy. And I just have two pictures there. And one is of some lichen I found the other day, and then I pulled out a picture from 2023, some oyster mushrooms just grew off of a tree. Huge.
Nice.
They were huge. Like they were three, like 5 inches coming off of the tree. Natural. I ate them. I ate them, but I haven't seen them since then. So,
Well, the mycelium's probably
okay,
still in the
you
tree.
do see my post.
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm
yeah.
doing something right. All right, I will continue doing that. Thank you.
And if you want, I'll link. This is the 2023 project
Mm-hmm.
we had. I'm gonna put in the chat. I can't. Now where's my Zoom meeting? Okay, here we go. So this is the link to you're successfully putting them on iNaturalist, but if you want to get like even more connected to the Wisconsin Mycological Society community on iNaturalist, like join this project. And if you click through on there in the description of that project, I have all WMS projects. And this is like this umbrella thing that you can join. And then you can also go through and join each individual project, which takes
All
you
right.
just a little bit of time. But then you're in there, and then this kind of like everybody who's in the project, the observations go to their dashboard right away. That when they open the app or they open it on their computer, and yeah, because you can get it on the desktop too, which is kind of nice to experience both.
All right.
Anyway,
Yeah,
I
this
love the
is new for me,
iNaturalist
so
project,
perfect. All right.
and I'll
Thank you for
confirm if
confirming.
you want.
Yeah,
No worries.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who was sticking around to hear me talk so long.
Thank you for the presentation. Very informative.
Thank you. And also thanks to people who showed up who know about like stuff about truffles and share. I appreciate
It was
that.
wonderful, Mariah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That was
You
spectacular.
got,
Thank you.
Yep.
you have a lot of thank yous in the chat too. So
Thanks. And I put my contact info in there for a reason. I'm pretty open about helping people with that and like getting into community science. And yeah, if you find a truffle, I am interested. And if I couldn't follow up on it, I would put you in touch with a researcher who could, if you wanted. So, but right now I'm about to be doing a lot of sequencing, so it's kind of like might as well.
Good luck on all your work. This is Sylvia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sylvia. Maybe someday I'll get to eat truffle.
Yeah, I know. There's
I've
a
had a couple. I've had staff did just bring me some and put some on my food.
I
So
have to
I'm
say,
more initiated.
one time we were coming back home with my mom, and my cousin was waiting there, like maybe 50 yards from our house, and he had 4 truffles that he had found at the oak tree right there by the road.
Whoa.
And we had hazelnut tree. I grew up right outside of Paris. Now I'm wondering if there were truffles there, and we didn't know, because I know my parents. Yeah.
Yeah, I really think it is something where we're walking over them all the time.
Yeah, and we just don't know that they're there. I'm hoping to be healthy enough to be able to go with it's my cousin's son that took over the breeding, and he's the one who's really who does a lot of truffle hunting now. But like I say, he's breeding dogs. But I just saw in there in the chat that there's oils available to train dogs here. So
yeah,
because that's kind of a chicken and egg. You know, my cousins have no problem because they have truffles.
They have the truffles, yeah.
Yeah, and they only use, the dogs do all year round, so they do detect. There's about 5, 6 different kinds, that they look for, that they can tell.
Oops, sorry. I was just going to say, and that's the thing I emphasized in my presentation, that I'd heard from people that fresh truffles is really good for training dogs, but I've certainly heard of people training dogs on the truffle well. So,
well, yeah, that's what someone said in the chat, and they gave the website. So, thank you so much. I've got to go, and I'm just learning. I used to go with my dad, but we did just Chanterelle and Maury, the morels. How do you say it? Morels? Yeah. And but that's what, and of course the cep, the bolide,
porcini.
Yeah, porcini. I should use the Italian porcini. So we did those 3, but I wish I had paid more attention. But I know those at least. So
I
thank you
think
so
that's
much. You are
thank
all
you.
so impressive. Oh my
Oh,
God. Oh my God. I have so
you
much
too,
work
Sylvia.
to
I was
do.
like, wow, you've got a whole family lineage. I don't
Huh?
have that. I would say you have a whole family lineage of knowledge of fungi, including truffles. I'm always really impressed with people's traditions that they've.
Yeah, in France and in Italy, they're very, as soon as it rains, it's like the next day they're they're out there
Mhm.
looking for. And then, of course, my Italian family who lived in France started eating snails, escargots. So now they do that too, because we have some really beautiful big one, kind of like what we call escargot de Bourgogne, Burgundy ones. So my Italian family that moved back to Italy, they do that too now. So it's kind of interesting, there's a whole group of people eating snails. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye,
Bye.
Sylvia.
Great evening to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you
You
too.
too.
Yeah.
And
Mariah, there would be a potential for the club to maybe actually have like a truffle themed dinner if
mhm.
we wanted to, because we have put together mushroom dinners before. And Diane Summers Yelton is a wonderful source. She actually gets Italian truffles like shipped in every now and
Mhm.
then. So, like, it would be interesting to work with a local chef and maybe, see about what we can get for pricing for, a
Yeah,
whole group or whatever. But yeah, we might be able to put something like that together.
I think we could definitely look at a lot of different avenues like that. And Steph was just at a truffle dinner, and apparently WMS used to do truffle dinners with the people she was with, and so they are interested.
Oh,
So yeah, I think we can put
that's
a lot of
cool.
people together, and it'll be really fun.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting if we could get, if I were to get good and do collections of our native truffles and get those cooked up too. That'd be interesting.
Well, you said you hadn't had like the Italian ones yet. And I
I
was like,
well,
that
just a
is,
little bit now.
too bad. Oh,
Yeah,
good. Okay. That's
the
great.
tuber melanosporum, yes. The like album, no. Magnum, no. So
Well,
anyway,
that's really expensive, but yes, I mean the black truffles are good enough. We'll say that.
these last kind of funny question in the chat from Matt. Have you examined the effects of truffles regarding physical addiction? Apparently, it's on par with cocaine or heroin. Not
Oh,
seen anything
I'm not
like that in the
surprised by
literature.
that.
Would love to quote that in the introduction to any paper if there were a literature source. Could send me that. But I've never heard somebody say it was like actually physically addictive. I've definitely heard the classic that some of the volatile compounds in some truffles mimic the sex hormone of the male, like wild boar or something, wild pig.
Let's
So if
go.
we call that addiction for the pig, the female pig.
You know what? After having truffles though, I have to tell you, like I'm not saying it's, like it does any sort of like it is a type of arousal, but it's not
Okay.
that type of arousal. Okay. Like it is, but it is something where when you eat it for the first time, you're very struck by it. Like it's like, wow, this is special. Like
Yeah.
it's delicious. And to me, and I've said this, probably 100 times, there is no other. I love mushrooms. That's why I'm here, guys. I love mushrooms, but there's no other mushroom for me that comes close.
Hmm.
Nothing.
Interesting. Okay, very, very cool. I'm really excited that people love my topic of research. I get into it because it's more on like the ecosystem side, but like it same with joining WMS. At first I was like, I'm only interested in fungi for science. And then like you go to enough potlucks and you're excited to eat mushrooms. I think it's the same thing here. So very, very cool. Um, yeah, probably should let everyone get to bed and get to dreaming about truffles. Practice in your dreams, everyone. Okay. Oh, and there's a Mary, please reach out to us. I'm got this out of the chat. Please and Oshkosh. Awesome. Cool. And anyone who I will say, oh, that was my good night, but I will say anyone who wants to send in suggestions, WMS for stuff we can do, we're always interested. Might not be able to do it, but we'll plan about it. Anyway, good night.
Thank you again, Mariah. That was really excellent. I think everyone really enjoyed themselves.
Thanks. It's a lot of fun. Oh, I see Steph. Actually, I'm gonna pin her thing. She's showing off her truffle dinner thing that she went to. Cool.
Yeah, I was gonna show like, so this was the menu. We got this little bag from Urbani's. There's like little truffle chocolates. They gave
Love.
us this truffle artichoke sauce.
Yum.
And we got the truffle salt. And of course, it wouldn't be like, without the actual
Oh,
Truffle
cool.
itself. Yeah.
truffle itself.
How much did you end up paying per head for the meal?
They were through 225, and I swear we were talking about that. I think we each ate an ounce of truffles.
Oh
And
my
they're $3
gosh.
a gram, so.
Yeah.
And they gave us this stuff, and there was a pour of wine for every course, so like 7 pours of wine.
That would be totally worth it.
Yeah, we
Totally
actually
worth
got
it.
seated. It was like family style seating, and we got seated with the Midwest or the Wisconsin importer of Italian wines. I noticed he was swirling extra well, and I finally was like, "Hey Frank, you know wine?" He's like, "Well, actually, we're drinking my wine right now." So that was cool. Yeah, and when the chef was Adam Siegel, he used to work at the Lake Park Bistro, and he came over and said hi to everyone, and I introduced myself, and I had my shirt on, and he's like, "We used to do dinners together. We should do another one." And I was like, "Well, great. Like, yes, let's talk. So it was very cool.
Very, very cool. Yes. And we're doing the world's best Wisconsin goodbye by like we've said it multiple times. And I've been invited to hang out with Matt at his campsite at the UP Continental Foray, or we've all been invited, by the way, to anyone not looking
Yeah.
at the chat.
How far away is your house, Matt, from the area? Do you know? Is he still here?
Yeah, I'm
80
still here.
miles?
It's 80 miles-ish, hour and some change. You just have to dodge moose and deer and wolves. But it's, a pretty
Right.
deserted. I used to do the farmers market in Marquette as a vendor, obviously for our mushroom farm. We no longer do that now. That's been taken over by a former customer who's launched a mushroom farm up there. We just stay local. But it's probably going to be pretty expensive. That area is very touristy to begin with. So if you don't have like your reservations well ahead of time for the Nama Continental foray, it's probably going to be pretty difficult to find a spot real close. And if you're willing to drive or carpool, etc., be free 90 free camping at my place. And the area next door, of course, is a 1,600-acre nature preserve that's second growth oak and has more diversity of orchids anywhere else in the Midwest. So
Cool.
it's kind of like a one in a million spot to go foraging as well.
Well, we'll see if I can work my connections with NAMA and be considered staff and be able to stay somewhere on site or
Right.
not. But if not, I'm keeping you in mind for sure because
Mhm.
I'm
I'll be
not made of money.
rendezvousing with other members of the education committee anyway. So
Mhm.
for whatever it's worth, I'll be driving up there as well. I can carpool with somebody if they want to go with me.
Cool.
But I mean, you're welcome to bring truffles, you know, it's for whatever it's worth. We'll do a big truffle dinner out at the land.
That would be really cool.
I
I
think so.
love truffles so much. Oh my gosh.
That is good. And yeah, so also shout out to the fact that they're the annual foray for the North American Mycological Association. It's going to be in Marquette, Michigan, based out of Marquette, Michigan, which is basically Wisconsin, the UP,
Yeah.
right up there. And it's really exciting. You can find out more on NAMA's website, North American Mycological Association. And yeah, and I also noted that Matt presented to us too on deer eating truffles. Truffles,
Hmm.
deer who
Yep.
eat, not truffles, but deer who eat
That's
fungi in general.
Yeah, no, I mean that's where the term mycophagy or microphagy comes from, is
Right.
from deer eating a truffle. So that was coined, and then it was named Elaphomyces in the same moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the origin story of that term and that interaction. So yeah, deer, big eaters of fungi and truffles specifically. Um, anyway, good night to everyone, and I'm actually going to end the meeting. Sorry as I
Good night,
am
Mariah.
to end talking about Truffle, but good night.
Good night.
Love y'all, and I'll see you on the trail.